stroll in it. And you open the next room and there's, 100 orcs. Now these people all just live, what are they doing? It's like living in a flat. And all these neighbours, some of them are dragons, and how did they get there? You've got this room which is basically got a small door, and there's a huge blue dragon in it. And you're going, how did the blue dragon get in there? And, what does it do? It just sits there. How does it eat? It can't just sit there waiting for people to come through the door for it to munch. And so that kind of thing very rapidly becomes very tiring because you just feel that the whole thing is just a mishmash, an assembly of objects and things that don't relate to each other in any way at all. So when I then did role-playing, what I would do is I would actually work out how this thing came into being. So if there was 100 rooms, there'd be a reason for the rooms. If there was something in the room, I would have imagined how it had got there and what it was doing before the players arrived, and what it was going to be doing tomorrow if the players don't actually kill it. So, and then you can imagine, the things that are going on before you, as the reader in this case, actually come and see something. So, the method. What I think, the way I write is, I normally begin with, not necessarily a single idea, but a book could start with a single idea. You have a single idea, and basically this is the seed from which you grow the book and the whole world in which this thing happens. Now, this seed can be anything. It can be a notion about how some characters interact with other characters. It can be some notion of, there's a particular city in a certain location that it's got these characteristics, or there's some historical process that's going to happen. Now, these things basically, they come from your subconscious. And I think all you actually have to do is just let the images float to the top, whatever they are, if it's a picture or something, and you start, those are the things that you work from. I started my professional life designing computer games. This was back way last millennium. It was 1980s or something, so obviously computer games now have moved on quite a lot. And one of the things about that was what I was doing was producing 3D simulations of various kinds. And the thing about that was you actually had to get all the details right because of the fact that the player could actually go and see everything. So it's not like in Hollywood, where you actually are walking down the street and there are all these buildings on either side, and fundamentally, they're just facades. Behind them, there's nothing. You actually, when you're writing a computer game, you actually have to be able to look around the back of things. And I think that actually, although initially when I started writing my book, I brought the same kind of rigor that I used for designing 3D games, I brought it to my book. And that was overkill, because it is still the case that a book represents a single path through, let's call it space-time. You're actually moving the characters or a number of characters through the world, and you actually only need to really know in excruciating detail the things that they see. However, I don't think it's possible to actually have those details be right unless you have a reasonable idea of what lies to the right and what to the left of the path that they're walking on. So I've become much more. I've become less rigorous because of the fact that the kind of rigor that I was putting into things was actually taking so long. That people, my translators were dying of old age, and it was just taking far too long for me to get the thing done. Now, the method that I use, having got your ideas, the core ideas, essentially your book is in there somewhere, and it's in your subconscious, that's what I believe. And it's a bit like Michelangelo saying that when he's carving a piece of marble, that the statue is already in the marble, and all he's doing is releasing it. So there's an element of, I think, you want to try and not try and force the thing to come out into the open. And because I think the thing is already there in your subconscious fundamentally, I think the core process of actually producing a world is that it's exploration. If, for example, you have some notion of the landscape, effectively what you're doing is you are moving through that landscape and you're exploring it yourself and you're trying to find out, why something is in this place. Why is the city here? Why is it beside this river? Where are the mountains? And gradually what happens is as you explore this thing and you assume that it's already there, things will just come into view. So you start with your seed, whatever they are. It might be a number of seeds. You see what the implications of those are. And what will happen is you will find that, if you have a particular thing, it will imply something else. And what you'll find is that you will come across lots of problems. This city, for example, is near the sea, so but it's on a river. So then you have to think, is the river wide enough for the ships that you want to come up and down? And you start thinking about the ships and the size of the ships and what does this mean about the trade. And gradually, as you come across problems, the problems are basically like doors. And as you open each of these doors, there's more of your world behind it. So effectively, I think the way I do it is that I make connections between various bits and pieces, and as the connections start hardening up, you end up with a skeleton, and then gradually you start putting flesh on the skeleton, and the thing becomes more and more real and more and more alive. To give you an example, in my trilogy, The Stone Dance of the Chameleon, there's this place called Osraku. And Osraku, I knew right from the beginning was going to be a caldera. And a caldera is basically, it's a volcano that has collapsed. And so you end up with the base of the volcano, and very often on the inside you end up with a lake. Now, so I had this core idea of this thing, and I worked out, it was a certain size, whatever. I had to work out, this automatically brings enormous numbers of implications. If I have a bunch of people who are living inside this caldera, it automatically means that, there is an inside and an outside. So they're living in a world which is closed in some way. Now, it happens that this caldera only has one way in. This basically means that you can imagine very easily that the people who are living on the inside are going to have less knowledge of the people who live on the outside, and vice versa, than they would have if they were just living in a city in the middle of a flat plain. One of the things that happens, for example, it means that because I had this notion that this caldera it's obviously formed from volcanic action. That means that it was not likely that there's only going to be one volcano. So I imagined obviously that at some point there had been one huge volcano that produced the caldera, but then there would have been other volcanoes. As a consequence, I knew that there were going to be islands in the middle of this lake. That automatically set up a contrast between the hub, the